Colonel, I believe this realistic demonstration has addressed your concern.
My leadership presence and combat readiness.
Colonel called her a liability. Then she dismantled 5 men in 83 seconds. Staff Sergeant Maya Chun straightened her uniform as she entered the evaluation conference room at Fort Carson at 0900 on Tuesday morning, expecting routine performance review documentation. Instead, she found Colonel David Briggs and 5 imposing male soldiers whose skeptical expressions revealed this was no standard assessment. In 90 seconds, their gender bias would meet combat reality. Maya, 28, appears to be exactly what traditional military culture dismisses: a small-statured Asian American female soldier whose quiet professionalism masks extraordinary combat skills earned through deployments where technique mattered more than intimidation. Her decorated record speaks louder than her soft voice, but institutional prejudice requires proof rather than credentials. What happened in Fort Carson's evaluation room would shatter assumptions about strength, skill, and military capability, while proving that the most dangerous warriors often look least threatening to those who judge by appearance rather than achievement. Fort Carson, Colorado, a major Army installation where traditional military culture confronts evolving warfare, demands requiring diverse capabilities beyond conventional strength-based assumptions. The base hosts multiple combat units whose leadership often struggles to integrate changing military demographics with established cultural expectations about warrior identity. The evaluation environment operates on institutional hierarchy, where advancement requires proving worthiness to superiors whose biases may conflict with objective performance standards. Recent integration of women into combat roles has created tension between progressive policies and entrenched attitudes that question female capabilities despite documented achievements. Modern military operations increasingly demand tactical intelligence, precision, and adaptability over pure physical dominance. But promotion boards still reflect traditional preferences for impressive physical presence and conventional masculine leadership styles. This setting represents the intersection where military evolution meets institutional resistance, creating situations where exceptional performers face discrimination based on outdated assumptions rather than actual capability assessment. Maya enlisted after graduating summa cum laude in strategic studies, joining the Army to prove herself in the ultimate meritocracy she believed military service represented. Her compact frame and analytical mind made her perfect for reconnaissance operations requiring stealth and intelligence gathering. During 3 combat deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq, Maya developed innovative tactical approaches that saved countless lives through precision rather than brute force. Her martial arts background combined with military training created unique combat capabilities that traditional assessments couldn't properly evaluate or appreciate. Despite exemplary service record and multiple commendations, Maya faces evaluation challenges from superiors who question whether someone of her physical stature can effectively lead combat operations or inspire confidence among larger, more traditional soldiers. Her promotion timeline has been delayed multiple times due to leadership presence, concerns that never apply to her actual battlefield performance. Maya maintains professional demeanor while internally questioning whether military meritocracy actually exists for personnel who don't match conventional warrior stereotypes that institutional bias perpetuates through evaluation systems designed around outdated assumptions. Maya possesses exceptional tactical intelligence combined with advanced martial arts training that enables her to neutralize larger opponents through technique timing and leverage rather than strength-based confrontation. Her combat experience taught her to read situations quickly and respond with precision that conventional training rarely develops. Maya's greatest strength is maintaining calm under pressure while executing complex tactical solutions that less experienced soldiers wouldn't recognize until after successful completion. Her leadership style emphasizes competence and results over intimidation, creating loyalty among subordinates who appreciate her professional effectiveness rather than traditional dominant command presence. Maya must prove her worthiness for promotion to officers whose gender bias prevents recognition of her exceptional capabilities, creating evaluation scenarios designed to expose perceived weaknesses rather than assess actual leadership potential or combat effectiveness. The primary obstacle is institutional prejudice disguised as legitimate assessment, where evaluation criteria emphasize physical intimidation over tactical competence, creating systems where exceptional performers face discrimination based on appearance rather than achievement or potential contribution to unit effectiveness. The stakes involve both individual career advancement and broader military culture evolution. Maya's treatment influences how other qualified personnel are evaluated, while institutional responses determine whether military meritocracy adapts to recognize diverse excellence or maintain systems that waste exceptional talent through prejudice that undermines organizational effectiveness. This conflict represents the challenge facing military institutions whose cultural evolution lags behind operational requirements that increasingly demand capabilities transcending traditional assumptions about warrior identity and leadership effectiveness. Maya's summons to Colonel Briggs's evaluation conference represented her final opportunity to demonstrate readiness for promotion to first lieutenant, despite performance records that should have guaranteed advancement months earlier through normal assessment procedures. Time to show these traditionalists what modern warfare actually requires, Maya told herself while reviewing her deployment achievements that emphasize tactical innovation over conventional combat approaches that her superiors seemed to prefer. The evaluation represented more than individual advancement. It was validation of whether military institutions could recognize excellence that didn't conform to established templates about leadership appearance and command presence that traditional assessments prioritized over actual effectiveness. They'll either see what I've accomplished or remain trapped by prejudices that waste military talent, Maya reflected while preparing for evaluation that would test institutional bias as much as individual capability. Her mission transcended personal promotion to include proving that diverse combat capabilities enhanced rather than compromised unit effectiveness. When properly understood and utilized by leadership willing to evaluate substance over appearance-based assumptions about military competence and warrior identity, that operational reality had already invalidated through successful deployments. Maya's preparation for evaluation emphasized documentation of tactical innovations and combat achievements that demonstrated leadership through results rather than traditional intimidation-based command styles that evaluation boards seem to prefer over actual battlefield effectiveness. Her approach focused on articulating how diverse combat capabilities enhanced unit performance through precision operations that minimized casualties while achieving objectives that conventional approaches might accomplish through less efficient methods requiring greater resources and risk. Most critically, Maya prepared psychological strategies for maintaining professional demeanor, despite evaluation scenarios designed to test reactions to institutional bias. Rather than assess actual leadership potential or combat readiness that deployment records had already validated. Her military training provided tactical framework for managing hostile assessment environments, document everything, maintain composure under pressure, demonstrate capabilities through action rather than argument, and trust that competence would eventually overcome prejudice if properly displayed. Maya also prepared contingency responses for evaluation challenges that might test capabilities outside normal assessment parameters, using her combat experience to anticipate unconventional scenarios that bias might create to justify predetermined negative conclusions about her suitability for advancement. Her documentation strategy emphasized objective performance metrics that evaluation bias couldn't easily dismiss, creating evidence trail that would validate her capabilities even if assessment process revealed institutional discrimination, requiring formal challenge through proper military channels. Maya entered the conference room, expecting standard evaluation procedures, but immediately recognized the hostile setup. Colonel Briggs, flanked by 5 large male soldiers whose presence suggested assessment through intimidation rather than professional review of documented achievements. Staff Sergeant Chun, we've reviewed your file and have concerns about your leadership presence in combat situations, Briggs announced, while the assembled soldiers displayed obvious skepticism about her capabilities based on appearance rather than performance records. Maya's response emphasized professional courtesy despite recognizing bias. Sir, my deployment records demonstrate successful leadership under combat conditions through tactical innovation that achieved objectives while minimizing casualties. Her measured tone contrasted with the confrontational atmosphere that evaluation committee had established. Records don't tell the whole story about commanding respect from subordinates who need confidence in their leaders, Briggs replied while dismissing documented achievements in favor of subjective assessment criteria that favored traditional assumptions about command presence. Maya maintained military bearing while recognizing that evaluation had become a test of institutional bias rather than individual capability, requiring strategic response that would either validate her competence or expose discrimination that professional military standards shouldn't tolerate from evaluation boards responsible for objective assessment. Colonel Briggs escalated the evaluation by questioning Maya's ability to command respect from larger male soldiers, suggesting that physical presence was essential for combat leadership, despite her documented tactical successes during multiple deployments. Soldiers need to believe their leaders can physically protect them, Briggs declared, while the assembled males nodded agreement, revealing collective bias that prioritized intimidation over competence. Maya's patient explanation of leadership through tactical excellence rather than physical dominance was dismissed as theoretical rather than practical approach to command responsibility that combat situations supposedly required from officers who looked capable of handling physical confrontations. The evaluation committee intensified pressure by suggesting Maya's combat achievements resulted from male subordinates' protection rather than her own tactical capabilities, undermining her leadership credentials through gender-based assumptions about battlefield dynamics that ignored documented evidence of her operational planning and execution success. Real combat requires leaders who can handle themselves physically, stated Sergeant Major Thompson while questioning whether Maya could defend herself if separated from her unit during operations. His challenge reflected systematic doubts about female combat capabilities that evaluation records contradicted, but institutional bias couldn't acknowledge or accommodate through standard assessment procedures. Briggs reached his breaking point by proposing practical demonstration of Maya's combat readiness through physical assessment that would either validate her capabilities or expose perceived weaknesses that traditional combat required from leaders responsible for soldier safety. "Let's see what happens when theory meets reality," Briggs announced, while ordering the 5 soldiers to prepare for sparring demonstration that violated normal evaluation procedures. Maya recognized discriminatory challenge designed to humiliate rather than assess, but also saw opportunity to definitively prove capabilities that documentation couldn't communicate to biased superiors, unwilling to accept evidence, contradicting preconceived notions about female combat effectiveness. The evaluation scenario attracted attention from other base personnel who began observing through conference room windows as word spread about unconventional assessment procedures involving female staff sergeant and 5 male soldiers in confrontational demonstration. Base security protocols required documentation of unusual training activities, creating official witnesses to evaluation methods that seemed designed to humiliate rather than assess professional capabilities through standard military assessment procedures that regulations required for promotion decisions. "This is highly irregular," observed Major Williams, who entered seeking Briggs for different matter, but found evaluation committee conducting physical demonstration rather than professional review of documented performance records that should have determined promotion eligibility. Other female personnel monitored situation with concern about implications for their own career advancement. If evaluation procedures prioritize physical confrontation over professional competence, demonstrated through successful mission completion and tactical innovation, military equal opportunity representatives would investigate any complaints about discriminatory evaluation practices, creating potential institutional consequences for assessment procedures that violated regulations governing fair evaluation standards regardless of gender or physical characteristics. Social media documentation by observing personnel created permanent record of evaluation methods that could trigger broader investigation of institutional bias if demonstration appeared designed to humiliate rather than professionally assess capabilities. Facing systematic bias disguised as legitimate evaluation tested every lesson military service had taught Maya about maintaining professional dignity while proving capabilities to superiors whose prejudices prevented recognition of documented excellence and operational effectiveness. The committee's discrimination forced Maya to balance individual advancement against broader institutional change, using her situation to expose bias that affected all personnel who didn't conform to traditional assumptions about military leadership appearance and command presence. Her response to evaluation harassment revealed character developed through combat deployments. She maintained tactical thinking under hostile conditions, applied strategic patience to long-term objectives and prioritized mission success over personal satisfaction from direct confrontation with bias. The confrontation crystallized Maya's understanding of institutional resistance to military evolution. Her documented achievements meant nothing to leaders who couldn't recognize excellence when it challenged established assumptions about warrior identity and leadership effectiveness. Maya's military identity strengthened under pressure, reminding her that her worth came from service accomplishments rather than institutional approval, and that her response to discrimination would influence how future personnel were evaluated by systems that needed reform rather than reinforcement. Her combat experience provided confidence for handling civilian prejudice that seemed less dangerous than enemy fire, but required similar tactical patience and strategic thinking for successful navigation. As Briggs's evaluation devolved into physical demonstration, designed to expose perceived weaknesses rather than assess documented capabilities, Maya faced moments where institutional bias would either be validated through her failure or exposed through her success in scenarios that violated normal assessment procedures. The 5 soldiers prepared for demonstration with obvious confidence that physical confrontation would prove their superiority over someone whose combat record they couldn't acknowledge due to gender bias that prevented recognition of tactical excellence transcending physical intimidation. Base personnel gathered as witnesses to evaluation procedures that could either humiliate exceptional performer or demonstrate institutional discrimination, requiring investigation and reform of assessment systems that wasted military talent through prejudice disguised as legitimate standards. Maya's response to discriminatory challenge would influence institutional culture regarding evaluation fairness and recognition of diverse excellence that modern military operations required, but traditional assessment couldn't properly identify or develop. The convergence of documented excellence, institutional bias, and physical demonstration created perfect conditions for exposing systematic discrimination that undermined military effectiveness through waste of exceptional talent that conventional evaluation couldn't recognize or appreciate. Colonel Briggs's discrimination reached its climax when he ordered Maya stripped of her gear and weapons for fair assessment against 5 fully equipped male soldiers, creating humiliating scenario designed to prove female inadequacy rather than evaluate actual leadership capabilities through legitimate assessment procedures. Real combat doesn't give you advantages, Briggs declared while violating every regulation governing fair evaluation practices. Let's see how you handle overwhelming odds without hiding behind equipment. His order revealed complete abandonment of professional assessment in favor of discriminatory demonstration designed to validate predetermined conclusions about female combat limitations. The situation exploded into institutional crisis when Maya faced impossible choice: submit to degrading physical demonstration that would validate gender bias, regardless of outcome, or refuse evaluation that could end her military career through insubordination charges stemming from legitimate objection to discriminatory assessment procedures. Sir, this evaluation violates military regulations governing fair assessment practices, Maya stated with military precision, while Briggs ignored her procedural objections in favor of demonstration that would either humiliate her through failure or surprise him through success he couldn't imagine. Maya realized that institutional bias had created a situation where documented excellence meant nothing compared to physical demonstration that conventional assumptions required for validation of capabilities that deployment records had already proven through successful mission completion and tactical innovation. The crisis transcended individual evaluation to expose systematic discrimination that wasted military talent through prejudice disguised as legitimate assessment, creating scenarios where exceptional performers faced humiliation rather than recognition for achievements that enhanced rather than compromised unit effectiveness and operational success. Standing in Fort Carson's conference room facing discriminatory physical demonstration designed to humiliate rather than assess, Maya confronted fundamental choice between accepting institutional bias or challenging discrimination that affected all personnel who didn't conform to traditional assumptions about military excellence. The safe choice was submission, endure degrading demonstration, accept whatever outcome bias determined, and hope that individual excellence would eventually overcome systematic discrimination through persistence rather than direct confrontation with institutional prejudice that evaluation committees represented. But Maya realized that her response would influence treatment of future personnel facing similar bias, while institutional tolerance of discriminatory evaluation would perpetuate systems that wasted military talent through prejudice that operational effectiveness couldn't afford during modern warfare requiring diverse capabilities. If I submit to this humiliation, I validate every assumption about female inadequacy, Maya calculated, while Briggs prepared demonstration that violated assessment regulations. But if I prove my capabilities, maybe institutional culture will finally recognize that excellence transcends traditional assumptions about warrior identity. Her decision crystallized around military values duty to challenge discrimination that undermined unit effectiveness, honor that demanded professional treatment regardless of gender and service to principles larger than individual advancement that required institutional reform rather than personal accommodation. The ultimate stakes transcended individual promotion to involve military culture evolution, whether exceptional personnel would continue facing discrimination based on appearance rather than achievement, or whether institutional assessment would finally recognize diverse excellence that modern operations required for maximum effectiveness. Maya's choice would determine whether Briggs's bias became learning experience or continued pattern of discrimination affecting qualified personnel whose capabilities didn't match conventional expectations about military leadership appearance and combat readiness. Maya made the choice that would transform institutional discrimination into educational opportunity. Accept Briggs's challenge while demonstrating capabilities that would expose the inadequacy of evaluation systems based on appearance rather than documented achievement and tactical competence. Colonel, I accept your assessment conditions, Maya announced with military bearing that commanded attention despite the degrading circumstances that bias had created. But I request that this evaluation be documented for review by appropriate military authorities responsible for fair assessment standards. Her transformation from accommodating subordinate to assertive professional created immediate shift in conference room dynamics as witnesses recognized potential discrimination case, while Briggs realized his evaluation methods might face institutional scrutiny. But Maya's acceptance of discriminatory challenge created new tactical opportunity prove capabilities so definitively that institutional bias couldn't dismiss her achievements, while creating precedent for evaluation reform that would benefit future personnel facing similar discrimination. "Ma'am, you understand these odds are designed to be impossible?" asked Sergeant Major Thompson, with mixture of respect and concern for outcome that his own bias couldn't predict, despite assumptions about female combat limitations. Maya's confidence was complete. Her combat training, tactical intelligence, and strategic patience were about to meet institutional prejudice in demonstration that would either validate bias or revolutionize military assessment forever. As Maya prepared for Briggs's discriminatory challenge, she applied tactical principles learned through combat deployments, where success required intelligence and precision rather than brute force that conventional military training emphasized over strategic thinking and technical execution. Her assessment of opponents revealed typical institutional bias. 5 soldiers chosen for size and intimidation rather than tactical competence, creating scenario designed to validate assumptions about physical dominance rather than test actual combat capabilities that modern warfare required. They expect traditional confrontation, Maya analyzed while observing their confident positioning that reflected conventional assumptions about combat dynamics. But real warfare rewards adaptation and tactical innovation over predictable approaches that opponents can anticipate and counter. Colonel Briggs activated recording equipment to document expected humiliation, unaware that his bias was about to create permanent evidence of institutional discrimination and exceptional individual capability that evaluation records couldn't adequately convey. Base personnel gathered as witnesses to unprecedented evaluation demonstration, while Maya's calm preparation contrasted sharply with opponents' obvious confidence in predetermined outcome that their size advantage seemed to guarantee despite her documented combat achievements. Maya's transformation from defensive subordinate to confident tactician created atmospheric shift that suggested approaching revelation about capabilities that appearance-based assessment couldn't recognize or appreciate through conventional evaluation methods. The conference room atmosphere became electric as Maya faced 5 soldiers whose collective weight advantage exceeded 400 pounds, while stripped of equipment that might have provided tactical equalizers for confrontation. That bias had designed to be impossible. "This is your last chance to reconsider," Briggs offered, while positioning cameras to document expected failure that would validate his assumptions about female combat limitations despite documented evidence of her tactical excellence during multiple deployments. Maya's response carried tactical confidence that surprised observers. "Sir, I appreciate the opportunity to demonstrate capabilities that evaluation records apparently couldn't adequately communicate to assessment committee." Her calm demeanor contrasted with opponents' obvious excitement about confrontation they viewed as easy victory. Sergeant Major Thompson whispered tactical advice to the 5 soldiers, while Maya stood alone, creating visual representation of institutional bias that pitted individual excellence against systematic prejudice, disguised as legitimate evaluation of combat readiness and leadership potential. Base security monitored situation with growing concern about irregular evaluation procedures, while other personnel began recording demonstration that could either validate traditional assumptions or expose discriminatory assessment practices that wasted military talent through prejudice rather than objective capability evaluation. The moment before action felt suspended as documented excellence prepared to meet practical demonstration and confrontation that would define institutional culture. Maya's tactical approach immediately revealed combat intelligence that evaluation committee couldn't recognize through conventional assessment. Instead of confronting superior numbers directly, she created movement patterns that isolated opponents while using their size advantage against them through leverage and timing, rather than strength-based confrontation. Her first engagement demonstrated principles learned through combat deployments, where tactical innovation overcame resource disadvantages, redirecting Corporal Martinez's aggressive charge into wall impact that eliminated him from demonstration while positioning herself advantageously for subsequent engagements that opponents couldn't anticipate or counter effectively. The assembled witnesses realized they were observing exceptional tactical competence rather than expected humiliation, as Maya's precise movements and strategic positioning revealed capabilities that appearance-based assessment had dismissed, despite documented achievements that evaluation records couldn't adequately convey to biased superiors. Colonel Briggs's confident expectation transformed to shocked recognition as Maya's demonstration validated combat records while exposing evaluation bias that had nearly wasted exceptional military talent through prejudice disguised as legitimate assessment of leadership potential and combat readiness. Maya's tactical success created immediate complications for institutional bias, as her systematic neutralization of larger opponents exposed fundamental flaws in evaluation systems that prioritized appearance over documented capability and strategic competence that modern warfare required. Sergeant Johnson's attempt to overwhelm her through brute force became tactical lesson in leverage and timing, as Maya used his momentum to eliminate him from demonstration while maintaining advantageous positioning for remaining opponents who couldn't adapt to tactical reality their bias hadn't anticipated. The evaluation committee faced cognitive dissonance as predetermined assumptions about female combat limitations collapsed under evidence of exceptional tactical intelligence and combat effectiveness that records had documented, but institutional prejudice couldn't acknowledge or accommodate through standard assessment procedures. Base personnel began recognizing that they were witnessing paradigm shift in military evaluation as Maya's demonstration proved capabilities that transcended traditional assumptions about warrior identity, while exposing discrimination that wasted exceptional talent through appearance-based assessment rather than objective capability evaluation. Briggs's recording equipment captured permanent evidence of both institutional bias and individual excellence that would influence military culture regarding evaluation fairness and recognition of diverse capabilities that operational effectiveness required despite conventional assumptions about combat leadership and tactical competence. The climactic moment arrived when Maya faced final two opponents simultaneously while demonstrating tactical innovations that combined her martial arts background with military training to create combat capabilities that conventional assessment couldn't recognize or properly evaluate through standard procedures. Staff Sergeant Williams and Corporal Davis attempted coordinated attack that represented institutional bias in action. Overwhelming force applied without tactical sophistication, reflecting assumptions about combat effectiveness that Maya's deployment experience had already proven inadequate for modern warfare requirements. Maya's response demonstrated why her combat record included tactical innovations that saved lives through precision rather than brute force simultaneous neutralization of both opponents through techniques that redirected their aggression while maintaining her positioning advantage that superior strategy created against superior numbers. The demonstration reached its crescendo as Maya completed systematic tactical victory in exactly 83 seconds, proving capabilities that documented achievements had recorded but institutional bias couldn't recognize until forced to witness practical demonstration of excellence that transcended traditional assumptions. Colonel Briggs faced complete reversal of his evaluation assumptions as Maya's performance validated every combat achievement, while exposing discriminatory assessment practices that nearly wasted exceptional military talent through prejudice disguised as legitimate concern about leadership presence and combat readiness. The conference room fell silent as witnesses processed demonstration that challenged fundamental assumptions about military capability while revealing individual excellence that institutional systems had failed to properly recognize or utilize, despite documented evidence of tactical competence and leadership effectiveness. Maya's tactical demonstration created complete transformation of evaluation dynamics as her systematic victory exposed institutional bias, while proving capabilities that conventional assessment couldn't recognize through appearance-based assumptions about combat effectiveness and leadership potential. Her post-demonstration composure demonstrated professional maturity that contrasted sharply with opponents' obvious shock at tactical defeat that their size advantage couldn't prevent through conventional approaches that Maya's strategic thinking had anticipated and countered effectively. Sir, I believe this addresses your concerns about leadership presence and combat readiness, Maya stated with military bearing that commanded respect from witnesses who had observed exceptional tactical competence rather than expected humiliation that bias had designed. Colonel Briggs faced impossible choice between acknowledging his discriminatory evaluation methods or maintaining institutional prejudice that demonstration had exposed as fundamentally flawed approach to assessing military capability and leadership potential that modern operations required. The breakthrough extended beyond individual vindication to institutional recognition that evaluation systems needed reform to identify and develop diverse excellence rather than perpetuating bias that wasted exceptional talent through appearance-based assessment incompatible with operational effectiveness requirements. Maya's victory became catalyst for military culture evolution regarding evaluation fairness and recognition of capabilities that transcended traditional assumptions about warrior identity while proving that documented excellence deserved institutional support rather than discriminatory challenge. Maya's demonstration created immediate policy discussions about evaluation reform, while Colonel Briggs faced institutional review of assessment practices that had violated regulations governing fair treatment and objective capability evaluation regardless of gender or physical characteristics. Base leadership implemented new evaluation protocols that emphasized tactical competence over appearance-based assessment, while Maya received immediate promotion approval that her documented achievements had already warranted through standard military assessment procedures. Most importantly, Maya's tactical victory established precedent for recognizing diverse excellence while exposing institutional bias that undermined military effectiveness through waste of exceptional talent that conventional evaluation couldn't properly identify or develop. Maya's tactical demonstration triggered immediate institutional reforms as her systematic victory over 5 opponents exposed evaluation bias, while validating combat capabilities that documentation couldn't adequately convey to prejudiced assessment committees whose assumptions undermined military effectiveness. Colonel Briggs faced disciplinary review for discriminatory evaluation practices, while Maya received accelerated promotion and assignment to develop new assessment protocols that emphasize tactical competence over appearance-based assumptions about leadership presence and combat readiness. The viral documentation of Maya's demonstration influenced military evaluation standards nationwide as her tactical innovations became training material for recognizing diverse excellence that conventional assessment had missed through institutional bias disguised as legitimate professional standards. Fort Carson implemented comprehensive evaluation reform while Maya's experience became case study for identifying and eliminating discriminatory practices that wasted exceptional military talent through prejudice incompatible with operational effectiveness requirements. National military leadership adopted Maya's tactical demonstration as evidence for evaluation system modernization that recognized capabilities transcending traditional assumptions about warrior identity and combat effectiveness in contemporary operational environments. 2 years later, Maya's influence on military evaluation culture extended throughout all service branches as her tactical victory became catalyst for assessment reform that prioritized documented capability over appearance-based assumptions about leadership potential and combat readiness. Military training curricula incorporated lessons from Maya's demonstration, while evaluation boards received mandatory education about recognizing diverse excellence that conventional assessment might overlook through institutional bias incompatible with operational effectiveness requirements. The Chun protocols became standard evaluation procedures that emphasized tactical competence and strategic thinking over physical intimidation, creating assessment systems that identified exceptional performers regardless of traditional assumptions about military appearance and warrior identity. International military organizations studied Maya's case as example of institutional reform that enhanced rather than compromised combat effectiveness through recognition of diverse capabilities that modern warfare required despite conventional assumptions about leadership presence. Her tactical innovations influenced combat training development, while proving that technique and intelligence could overcome physical disadvantages when properly applied through strategic thinking that deployment experience had validated, but institutional bias couldn't recognize. Maya evolved from discriminated subordinate to respected innovator, whose tactical excellence transformed military evaluation while proving that documented capability deserved institutional recognition rather than appearance-based discrimination disguised as legitimate assessment procedures. Her promotion to training development leadership enabled institutional reform that benefited all personnel facing evaluation bias, while establishing precedent for recognizing excellence that transcended traditional assumptions about military competence. Excellence speaks through results, not appearance, Maya often explains to evaluation boards. Military effectiveness improves when assessment recognizes capability regardless of conventional expectations about warrior identity, that operational reality has already proven inadequate. Maya's story proves that institutional bias wastes exceptional talent, while operational effectiveness requires recognition of diverse capabilities that transcend traditional assumptions about military excellence. True meritocracy evaluates documented achievement rather than appearance-based prejudice that undermines organizational success through discrimination disguised as professional standards. Epilogue. Today, Lieutenant Colonel Maya Chun directs the Military Assessment Innovation Center at Fort Carson, where her tactical victory revolutionized evaluation systems throughout the armed forces. Her 83-second demonstration became legendary training footage that educates military leaders about recognizing excellence regardless of appearance, while the conference room where she defeated institutional bias now hosts evaluation reform seminars. Colonel Briggs, after completing mandatory bias education, became one of Maya's strongest advocates for assessment modernization that identifies rather than wastes exceptional talent. The 5 soldiers who underestimated her became her first training partners in developing curricula that emphasized tactical intelligence over physical intimidation. Maya's techniques are now taught at military academies worldwide, proving that her victory transcended individual advancement to transform institutional culture. Her influence extends beyond evaluation reform to combat training innovation that recognizes diverse approaches to tactical excellence, while her story continues inspiring personnel facing discrimination to trust that documented capability will eventually overcome appearance-based prejudice when properly demonstrated. The military's evolution from bias-based assessment to competence-focused evaluation reflects Maya's legacy, proving that true strength comes from tactical intelligence, strategic thinking, and technical precision, rather than intimidation that conventional assumptions mistook for military effectiveness, demonstrating that the most dangerous warriors are often those whose capabilities transcend traditional expectations about what strength actually means in modern warfare contexts.